Chapter 2. Best Friends. 1. Next day, William was up long before Elsie and Aunt Edna. Uncle Walter, as was his habit, had been up before dawn and was already in his shop. Elsie had promised she would show him around the village that morning, but when William awoke, he decided to explore on his own for a while. Leaving notes for Elsie and Aunt Edna, he went out without having breakfast in his eagerness to see if the village was still as he remembered it. It was a cool but pleasant morning, and William wandered around the streets exploring every inch of the village. Avenfore was not that big, barely a few hundred inhabitants, and of those, most lived scattered out in the countryside. All the shops, including Uncle Walter's antique shop, faced onto the village square, which was shaped more like a flat-topped triangle, and into which all roads leading to and from Avenfore converged. In the middle of the square was a small, neatly planted garden, with an ancient 8-foot-high stone Celtic cross at its center. William made his way over to it. The cross was covered with intricate patterns and carvings of odd-shaped humans and animals. Leaving the square, William strolled down a narrow laneway until he reached a jetty reaching out over the River Inny, where a number of boats were moored. From there, he headed along the Drunfarnham Road past a large church with a bell tower and a clock and a huge old oak tree beside it. After the hustle and bustle of the city, it seemed strange not to meet anybody as he walked. The only sound was that of the rooks cawing as they flew among the beech trees and the younger oaks which lined the riverbank. As the church bells began to chime 8 o'clock, William decided it was time he should be getting back. Elsie would be up and waiting for him by now. As he walked back the way he had come, a rather oddly dressed figure in the distance caught his eye. It was the strange man he had seen at Drunfarnham railway station the previous evening. He was still wearing the grey gabardine and black trousers. The man drew nearer, and William gave a slight shudder. The man was decidedly odd in appearance, with piercing eyes that looked out from a pale face marked by a small scar on the left-hand side of his chin. His hair was rather peculiar too. Without his helmet he had a mane of hair like some medieval monk. To William's surprise, the man appeared to be heading directly for him. As he neared, William tried to hurry past him, but to his alarm the stranger blocked his path. "Please," the man said, twisting his face into a sinister smile. "What is the time?" 8 o'clock, William said, indicated towards the church clock across the way from where they were standing. However, the stranger didn't look at the clock. Instead, he stood there staring at William in a rather sinister way. "Excuse me," William said, feeling increasingly uneasy. "I've got to go." Again the man blocked his path, but to William's relief, he heard someone whistling a song from behind. Turning around, he saw a tall auburn-haired boy with a post bag slung over his shoulder, wheeling his bicycle along the footpath towards them. "Hello," William said, running up to the post boy. "I don't suppose you have any post for the Harkwells, do you?" The youth looked at William earnestly. Well, I may do." He began to rummage in his post bag. "I'll just have a look." "Thanks," William said, as he turned around to check what the monk motorcyclist was doing. To his surprise and relief, the strange man was gone. "You're William Howbeler, aren't you?" the postboy said. "Yes," William said. "How do you know who I am?" The older boy held out his hand. "Chris Durfin," he said. "I'm a friend of your cousin Elsie." William grinned and shook Chris's hand. "Great to meet you, Chris. But aren't you too young to be a postman?" Chris laughed. "My dad's the postman. I just help him out during the school holidays." "Do you go to St. Elm's?" William asked eagerly. "Yes, but I'll be in the class above you. Anyway, we'd best be going. Elsie asked me to keep an eye out for you. She is meeting us at Mr. Harkwell's shop." 2. Uncle Walter's antique shop was on the corner of one of the streets, running off the main square. It was fine old 2-story building with an arched side entrance, where Aunt Edna usually parked the van. When William and Chris arrived it was still closed, But Uncle Walter was clearly expecting them, as he opened the shop door before William had a chance to knock. "There you are, boys," he said. "The girls are on their way. Look, I'm about to get to work on the cuckoo clock I got in Dublin. It just needs a good clean, some adjusting, and a bit of oil. Do you know it's an authentic Black Forest cuckoo clock? I'll soon have it ready to add to in my collection." William's thoughts flipped back to the encounter with the strange man with the heavy accent on the riverbank. "The Black Forest? That's a part of Germany, isn't it?" he said. "Indeed it is," replied Walter, as he picked up a rag dipped in a mixture of wax and turpentine and began to polish the clock. Just then the shop door opened and in came Elsie, accompanied by a pretty girl William didn't recognize. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, William." "Morning, Chris," Elsie said. "William, do you remember my best friend?" William looked awkwardly at the girl, who smiled at him and fiddled with her cardigan. For the second time that morning, Chris Durfin came to his rescue. "Of course he's not going to remember her, Elsie," Chris said. "This is my sister Bridget Durfin," he explained to William. Bridget scowled at her brother and put out her hand. "Welcome to Avenfore, William. I'm very pleased you're here." William stepped forward and put out his own hand, accidentally knocking against a tin clockwork figure in the shape of a drummer boy on a nearby shelf as he did so. The sudden burst of loud tin drumming made him jump, which set the girls off giggling and William blushing. Elsie linked his arm and grinned at him. "Come along. We're going to show you around the village." She glanced over slyly at Chris. "Do you want to come along too, Chris?" William saw Chris redden slightly as he answered Elsie. "Thanks, but I can't just now. I've still got a parcel to deliver to Miss Molly." "Oh." William couldn't help noticing the disappointment in his cousin's voice. But before she could protest, Chris was already out the door of Uncle Walter's shop and back on his bike. "Welcome to Avenfore, William," he called as he rode off. "Good to meet you." Flanked by the two girls, William crossed the street from the antique shop towards the garden in the middle of the square. Once there, Elsie climbed onto the stone pedestal of the Celtic high cross. "So this is the bird's-eye view," she said, and gestured around the square dramatically. "This is the main square in the village. And that's the way to Dunfermline, the next biggest town to Avenfore," she said, pointing in the direction of the church. "You can also get there by boat along the River Inny. It takes longer by road because it detours right round the mountain. To the west you go to Drishleen, which is a tiny village that is much further than Dunfermline." Elsie was like a compass, her arms whirling around the cardinal points. The River Inny flows through Ravenwood Forest, with Ravenwood Castle in the middle of it. The castle is right beside the lake, and on the other side of it is Dunfermline Mountain. According to the legends, it's where the Druids used to live. "St. Elm's Boys' School is on the road to Dunfermline," Bridget added. "Past the church about 200 yards from St. Clementine's Girls' School, which is where me and Elsie go to school." Elsie jumped down from the cross pedestal. "Anyway, Avenfore's tiny. In a couple of days, it'll be like you never left." "I hope so," said William. "I'm looking forward to knowing where everything is. It's not that I don't remember it. Just not clearly enough, and some things look quite different when you're 4. The girls laughed and sat down on the bench in the small garden in front of the high cross. "I like sitting here," Elsie said. "You get to see everyone passing by." At that moment, a tall, dark-haired man dressed in a long black purple-lined cloak crossed the street to the square garden. His face was serious and elegant, but reflected a certain bitterness, William thought. Or maybe he was just plain grumpy. And what was with the cloak? It made him look like something out of an old Victorian detective novel. The man walked straight by them, his cloak brushing against Elsie as he swept past. He didn't seem to notice them at all. "Who is that?" William asked, as the man strode off in the direction of the church. "That's Byron Mulween," Elsie said. "The owner of Ravenwood Castle. I don't like him." He's a bit creepy. He's awfully gloomy, Bridget agreed. I always get the feeling he's hiding something, Elsie added. And we're not the only ones in the village to think so. Does he live alone at Ravenwood Castle? William asked. Almost. When his father died, all the staff left except for Ernest Wiglan, his father's faithful old caretaker, and the Dreefys, Mary and Elwood. She's the cook, and her husband is the gardener. I certainly can't imagine anyone wanting to work for such a sour-looking man. Hardly anyone in the village likes him. Personally, William thought Byron Mulween and Ravenwood Castle were rather intriguing, but the look on Elsie's face made it clear he wasn't going to get any further information from her about them at this point in time. Having sat for long enough, the three left the High Cross garden to explore the rest of the village. Elsie showed William the library and Malcanary's sweet shop and cafe. The village hall was located at the start of the Drishleen Road, while the village park at the back of the hall led onto the forest road out towards the old Holly Point water pump, Bridget explained. Maybe we could go for a bike ride later this afternoon. I'll ask Chris to come too, Bridget added. That sounds great, William said. He smiled at Bridget, and now it was her turn to blush. Meet us outside Dad's shop at 2:30 so, Elsie said. Bridget left, waving goodbye to William as she went. Grinning broadly, Elsie linked arms with her cousin and pulled him in the direction of Fern Lane and home.